go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead and before you, I know you want to zoom out on the gun topic, but just go ahead and give us a quick rundown of some of the graphics that you put together, because that might be we only have limited time, so go ahead and give us some of those. I want to use some of those.
Okay, so just broadly, this week in guns, four proposals did not pass the Senate, but two were they were basically two different sets. One set on the terrorist watch list and one set on background checks, each by different parties. None passed, so why not really? Like, why get into them? But the first graphic we have that
Mm-hmm.
I put up is the the average cause of gun death. So the large blue circle, 62% is suicide, 34% is crime. Uh, the I believe about 2% is police shooting, and the other 2% is about is accidental shooting.
And so it's
So
important, or I was just going to say, it's important for us that when we're talking about the gun debate, that we keep this in mind about what is the cause, what is causing, or what is the average loss or cause of death in these situations that we see. An overwhelming majority are suicide, crime, those two making up the vast majority of them, while things like mass shootings, like that are getting attention in the news headlines, are a very small percentage of shootings. We'll continue on that. Go ahead.
mass shootings make up about 2% of all shooting deaths in the United States of America. Just for context sake, the next chart we have is going to show us how many gun deaths we've had so far in the year 2016. So we have about 60,000 gun deaths so far in 2016, and 150 of those have been from mass shooters. That's getting a little bit more context. So about 2% of gun deaths are from mass shootings. The rest are suicides and other forms of crime, gang violence, inner city. And the last chart we have is the type of gun used. So most people use handguns during homicide and during suicide, uh, or they and the other gun types are used in the minority of cases. So that's sort of the background for the gun debate we're going to have. How many shootings are mass shootings? How many types of gun deaths are homicides? And what kind of guns they are using in these homicides? So now we can talk about all the problems with the legislation we see.
All right. Awesome. So that's just to give us in those, I presume, CDC numbers most likely, with
Yes,
FBI possibly.
CDC, gun violence prevention watchers, variety of sources. The CDC can't do any real research on gun violence for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
but
And I'm sorry to rush us along through this, and there's I know we're gonna have to come back to it. Maybe it'll be next week. Maybe it'll be 2 weeks from now. But there's just what happened today. You mentioned the sit-in, and that came to an end. And unsurprisingly to me, there was no legislation passed, and we essentially you go on and tell us a little bit about what was able to get accomplished during that sit-in.
nothing. The sit-in was a joke. John Lewis should be ashamed of himself
Careful.
because all it was a ploy to raise money for his reelection campaign. He sent out six or more fundraising letters to his constituency. And you know what? Georgia has an F from the Brady campaign. Georgia has some of the worst Georgia, the state he represents, has some of the worst, loosest gun laws in America. So this was a ploy. At no point did he put out any comprehensive legislation. At no point did he speak to the heart of gun issues. At no point did he do anything other than grandstand and sit down and pretend as though this was the straw that broke the camel's back.
There's been a plethora of research, and some dropping there, a plethora of articles, and I know Ben's covered it a bit, and other people have covered it regarding what I guess what I'm looking the legislation that was put forward, and why it wasn't getting progress, or what was one of the problems with it was one of the amendments or resolutions towards it was to deal with people on a no-fly, no-buy list, this type of thing. And the ACLU and the left has largely been against these lists because they overwhelmingly target people of color and of foreign descent, and that it was weird to see them push so hard on this, and sometimes some of the people, either casually, accidentally, or just letting themselves, their minds speak freely, essentially equated the people on this list to being terrorists, not just suspected of terrorism by the FBI or Homeland Security, but they were talking about them as if they were already terrorists.
The terrorist watch list and any sort of legislation based off of that terrorist watch list is basically how we deal with any kind of thing that involves terrorism in America. It's vague and racist. Like, it's essentially meant to be vague and racist and overextend the powers of the state. It's not meant to comprehensively deal with this problem. It's meant to paint people as terrorists, and then under the Patriot Act, be able to strip away their rights and shave away their rights slowly over time.
If we're going to bring up rights and guns, let's at least be nuanced about it and explain through what gun rights are. Let's explain through the Second Amendment, and let's explain that until recently, you have to follow the entirety of the Second Amendment, which states the right to bear arms shall not be infringed as part of a well-regulated militia. Up until like the earlier mid-2000s, in which one Supreme Court case said, well, you know what, private citizens can own a gun. We're not going to stop you from owning a gun. You know, until then, your rights weren't being infringed by that. Do I agree with you about the watch list? Absolutely. Totally 100% agree. They're absolute bullshit. The problem is, gun rights have not been guaranteed for the vast majority of this country's time in existence. You've not been allowed as a private citizen to just have a gun. So I don't really feel that taking that right away is infringing upon it. Taking that away is infringing upon in any way people's rights. We had an assault weapons ban already. We've had these kinds of things in the past. So let's give at least that bit of context to that conversation.
That's completely fair, and I totally agree with you, except for the fact that if this is going to be the metric by which we take people's guns away, that's the problem. This list is not specific or like well thought out or well researched. It's vague, and so it's not that they're taking away people's gun rights. It's that they are using this list as a sort of carte blanche to take away any rights. And do not get me wrong. Do not misunderstand me. I am not pro-gun.
And to be fair, to total transparency here, I'm absolutely anti-gun. I would like to see us move to the English model. Nobody owns a gun. That's my preference, and I just want to make sure that my bias is thrown out there.
And I will express my bias too, because I will be fair. Guns don't kill people. People don't kill people. Poverty kills people.
True.
Persecution kills people. Isolation kills people. Ideology doesn't kill people. Islam doesn't kill people. Social issues kill people. Any unequal distribution of wealth, unequal access to basic necessities, and just
what's the most efficient way to kill people, though? As a private citizen, what's your most efficient way of killing people? That's absolutely legal. It's much harder. You can't. A firearm is easy enough in the United States of America just to go pick up, go to Walmart, get you a gun and a box of ammunition, and right there you have the ability to act on these social pressures, which I agree with you, are at the heart of the issue. The thing about guns is they give people the opportunity to act on that. They give you you're 100% more likely to get into a gunfight if a gun is on your person, as opposed to someone who doesn't. If I don't have a gun, I'm much less likely to get into a gunfight than the guy with one walking down the street.
It's because it's not a gunfight, it's just a shooting.
Okay.
Who's to say that I'm going to get shot, though? I mean, it's an escalate situation. My house was shot. There was a drive-by shooting on my house. I prefer to not have a gun in those situations because all that's going to do is escalate the situation even further. If someone pulls a gun and then I pull one right out, not only I'm just anti-testosterone. That's all I've done there. I've not done anything to defuse the situation or make them think twice about what they're doing.
Yeah,
That's
but
not.
Fair
It
point.
doesn't
Get in there,
make
Brandon. Get in there.
and from my perspective, though, I'm less concerned with the fact that people have guns, but why they feel they need guns. And so that is my sort of I guess psychological burden. I don't want to live in a society where people feel like they have to be walking down the street carrying guns in the first place. Because if you take away those guns, people are still going to feel that way, and eventually they come back. Like this is not sort of, and an assault rifle ban is not particularly going to tackle the kind of gun violence you're talking about. An assault rifle ban is going to tackle a very, very specific type of gun violence that is perceived as a threat by the media and the privileged people.
I
Because
fully beg to differ.
huh?
I have to absolutely 100% unequivocally disagree with you there because automatic assault rifles are a big deal in gang country. In gang shootings, using an AK-47 has a litany of slang terms for that specific weapon because of the amount of damage it can do. It is a preferred weapon for a lot of people doing drive-by shootings to inflict the most amount of damage possible. You remove guns from the equation in general, I think you remove a very important barrier to being able to address those issues. But let's say we don't totally ban guns, which is my idea. Let's say we regulate everything. What about this? Let's say we regulate everything. You can only buy up to 10 rounds of ammunition at a time. You can't have more than 6 rounds in any weapon at any given time. Assault weapons are kept if you want to be a sports shooter, those are kept at gun ranges, things like that. We regulate everything down to the very last round, right? Everything's regulated. I still think I don't think as long as guns are around, we're going to be able to address some more of those cultural issues that you brought up, which I think are absolutely at the root of gun violence. But guns are such a part of American folklore. It's too ingrained. If we can't get rid of them, we can't have that conversation.
Go, Brandon.
I agree. Okay, so again, I wish Magneto would come down from the sky and take all guns out of America and put them into the sun or whatever.
Right.
But I think that to a certain extent, getting rid of guns, or rather demonizing guns, is just obfuscating the true problem. And I think that an assault weapons ban specifically is at best an admission that only certain types of gun violence are bad. And those are the types of gun violence that could theoretically happen to uh, elite communities, college campuses, communities of predominantly white people. Uh, I think that ultimately, when you have people like John Lewis sitting down talking about, oh, well, like, look how many gun deaths we have, and then Orlando, it's equating two things that are not contiguous. It's like Orlando is not indicative of the gun crisis America is having. America's gun crisis is in our inner cities and in the homes of people who have mental illness that is going untreated because A, they don't have access to health care, or and B, we demonize mental illness.
True.
And it's important to note that that most of the mentally ill folks that are dealing with this, they're more likely to be a danger to themselves, even with firearms, than they are other people. Just because I know that it's often easy, and I'm sure I've heard from people with mental instabilities or with issues that they feel sometimes the way it gets talked about that they feel marginalized or they feel like they're being scapegoated when they're really they're more of a danger to themselves at large. Like as we talked about with the type of gun, that handguns are more prevalent in shootings than assault weapons. A lot of those suicides are made up of the mentally ill of one way or another.
I'm sorry, I mean to clarify. I will 100% clarify. People who are suffering from mental illness are way more likely to be the victim of gun violence, to be the victim of violence in general, and to commit suicide, to harm themselves with guns, than they are to actually harm other people with weapons.
And I agree with your guys' points. I agree with that. And here's the thing that I'm saying, is I think we have to be able to open the door. I think with the assault weapons ban, even if it doesn't, with it not passing, sure, am I happy about it? Absolutely not. The AR-15 was designed to kill people as many people as possible and as efficiently as possible. I'm not happy that it didn't pass. I would like to start having these conversations. We absolutely need to have an overhaul of mental health. We need to make sure that our mental health care in this country is brought up to par, that our people are being taken care of. We run into these issues where, you know, both sides are like, well, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, or, you know, and it goes both ways. But I mean, it's a start. An assault weapons ban, a conversation around assault weapons is a start to having a broader conversation about what's been going on, about how to solve a lot of these issues.
And I think what Brandon's suggesting might, and I'm sorry for making your point before you do, is that that may be a distraction from the actual more important and more effective issues that we need to deal with if we actually want to reduce gun violence.
But who wants to listen to that? Yeah. And who wants to listen to that until something happens that makes them sit down and listen? And that assault weapons ban, these mass shootings, they're absolutely ridiculous, and they should not be happening. Period.
I agree.
We have to have that conversation.
I disagree. I don't think this is a start. I think this is a defining of the problem of the gun crisis in America by the portion of it that most makes people in power, or people who look at people in power, or people who have large amounts of social capital, afraid. I am not afraid of there being a mass shooting at the Harvard campus. I am not afraid of there being a mass shooting at UCLA. I'm afraid of the fact that I live in Brooklyn, and when I walk down the street and it's 90 degrees outside, the block is hot in more ways than one. That's what I'm afraid of. There have been more shootings in Chicago since the beginning of June than people who died in Orlando. And to equate the two, or even to pretend like they have that solving one of those problems is going to solve, solving the problem of mass shootings is going to solve the problem of the gun crisis, is disingenuous. I don't believe in trickle-down gun control.
You say anything about trickle-down?
You're insinuating that if we just solve...
That's not what I'm insinuating at all. I'm saying let's start a conversation. And to have a conversation with people that aren't invested in what's going on in Chicago, like you and I are not going to be able to aren't going to come to the table until they see guns as a bigger threat to their livelihood, as a bigger threat to their children, as people in our community see it to ours. Until then, they're not invested. We are very much invested, and we see the actual issues of the gun violence. We see the roots here in America. But you have to work with what you're given, as sad as that is in this country, as sad as it is that it takes, you know, white people feeling threatened by weapons, when you and I walk down the street every day more likely to die from gun violence than anybody else just because we happen to be black men. We have to start working it. We have to work our way in, because they're not going to want to listen to us. They don't want to listen to us about anything. They don't want to listen to us about police violence, about poverty, about education. They don't give a damn how we feel about guns. They do not give two damns or a fuck. So we must go to where they are willing to listen, and then make sure our voices are at least heard there to start. And that is exactly what I feel we need to start doing, is start the conversation.
No, I agree.
That's going to be it.
I cannot agree. I don't think we should define the entire problem of society by its most valued minority or plurality. I think
what Brandon's pointing out is that, like, in many issues, one that comes to mind and plays a bit off of what we were talking about earlier with transgenderism, and how Bruce or Caitlyn Jenner became a symbol for the transgender community, only to find out that if you actually look into the transgender community and you speak with many people that are a part of that community, that their opinion of Caitlyn Jenner is very different than what the media is telling us about Caitlyn Jenner regarding the side of the media that's in favor of her or supports her.
Do you see that community tearing her down? Or do you see that as there's been more conversations about marginalized communities when it's been brought, because as bad as it is, this is a Eurocentric culture. When white people are affected, they're more willing to listen to what we have. We have to pick our battles. If I'm going to make sure that my voice is listened to, I'm in no way saying that this is the end of the conversation with assault weapons. I'm saying that, hey, guess what? You are now paying attention to gun violence. Now listen to what the fuck we've been telling you since day one. Since day one. Look at Chicago. Look at Compton. Look at what's going on in Tacoma. Let's look at New York. Let's look at Miami. Let's look at these areas with high gun violence. Now that you understand what we're coming from, what we're saying. Now that you have the inclination to listen to us, whereas before you did not. That is what we have to do. You have to get your voice in there somehow, some way. And if it means that I have to say, you know what, white people, you're finally feeling some of this. You're now seeing gun violence as a problem, and that's why I can start my conversation because now you'll listen to me. Then that's what I'll do. But that is where I will start it, not where I wanted it.
But that doesn't mean that's where they will not end it. And that's the problem. This will be a smash and grab, like it always is. It's
You don't
always
have to pass
a
the
smash and
legislation.
grab. I'm talking about the fact that they will solve this problem. I'm talking about the fact that within American society, there have always been groups of people who deserve to live in fear. People who deserve to be afraid of violence. People who deserve to be afraid of the police. People who do not deserve to be able to walk down the street and feel safe, either because of the color of their skin, their religion, how much money they have, whatever. And so the idea that once something happens to them, they will sort of transfer that, they will develop empathy, it has never been the case.
Who said they're going to develop it spontaneously?
Because what this assault weapons ban is, it's them saying, yes, some people deserve to be afraid, but not these people. These people do not deserve to be afraid. This is the exact same thing why Occupy Wall Street got so much attention. It was now the people who were supposed to win.
But what happened? What happened with Occupy? What did it do? It started a conversation. It launched like Bernie Sanders out.
Not about black poverty. I think you got a point there.
Not about black poverty. Not about
in this election cycle. One of the things that I've heard being talked about at my local level is black folks coming in and saying, "Guess what? Here's my reality." Because we were given that. Because sometimes, as bad as it is, you've got to get into that table somehow, some way. Occupy gave us a way to get to that table somehow, some way. You go to Seattle and you talk about that. Guess what? When Occupy happened and we were able to be like, hey, guess what? This adversely affects us more than it affects y'all. We started being able to come to those tables more often. Because we got in, there was that sliver opened up, and we barged our way through. Because sometimes to affect change, you have to force people to see you. And people don't want to see you until there's a sliver in that door because something happened to them.
All right, Brandon, I'm going to have to give you the last word on this in response to Adair. And Adair, you're welcome to come back, and I think we're going to continue this conversation. There's lots of details that we didn't have a chance to get into, so there's lots more. Just wanted to give people a quick heads up. Benjamin's going to be coming on in just a couple minutes. And you have to keep it real short, Brandon. You got about 30 seconds, and then just got to close out. So you can tag on 30 seconds for closing. And Adair, and I know Ava had to leave, but I just want to thank her again for joining us, and she's definitely welcome back anytime. And look forward to speaking with her again in the near future. So Brandon, if you can sum up your counter to Adair.
We barged our way in, and what did they do? They homogenized us, and they homogenized Occupy. They homogenized Bernie's followers, and they homogenized Hillary's followers. Bernie's followers were all white millennials who just, hey, man, like the hippies, they want free stuff. And Hillary Clinton was running the goddamn Rainbow Coalition, except the only color in it was green. And so, really, to me, we got in, some of us, but we cannot be taken in by the notion that there are a few more brown faces in high places, and so therefore we've, they let us speak at public meetings and they listen and they clap and they say, oh yeah, like these guys have it hard too, because eventually they go home and race doesn't mean anything. Because we don't teach empathy properly in this country. We're not integrated. They come to a public place and we have a meeting, we all talk and we all hug, but then they go home and they don't see black people, they don't see brown people, they don't see anyone else who doesn't look like them on TV or in their own family or in their friend circle.
And that's an important point that Brandon brings up. And I'm sorry to cut you short there, but we are up against the hard line, and so thank you both for joining us. It was a great spirited discussion. I look forward to continuing it and expanding on it in the future. I hope people were able to get an idea of what it's like on the left of people that have different perspectives on something that seems to be a unanimous issue. We know we've quoted 89% support background checks, but once we get past that particular detail, it starts to get a little bit more murky. And this is the type of things that people have mentioned it before, that progressives eat their own, or that we're never pure enough for one another. And so this is a great, I think, this lines up perfectly with what Bernie was talking about and what a lot of us have in mind of, if we're going to work together about getting something accomplished, these are the types of conversations that we're going to have to be able to have, and then still come back and work together the next day. And so thank everyone for joining us. Thank you all for watching. I just want to thank you for watching, sharing the Benjamin Dixon channel, subscribing, following us on Twitter, all those things. Thank you again so much for your time, and we were a little short on everything. We ran long, so we don't have time for a moment of sanity today, but we'll make sure to get you one next week. Thanks again for tuning in. You have a wonderful day, and bye-bye.